In addition to slope, there are two other topographical indices that are important in terrain analysis and are derived from the gridded elevation data. They are profile and plan curvature that are useful in measuring or predicting soil water content, overland flow, rainfall response, distribution of vegetation, so on. And to understand this, you will see that the plan curvature is measured perpendicular to the direction of the descent. The profile is following the direction of descent. And the plan is measuring convergence or divergence of the flow, and the profile is measuring acceleration or deposition. Now, the user significance is here we're measuring across the steepest extent, and you can see that this is convergent, so the water is converging, or in this case the water moving on this hill slope is diverging, and it's also accelerating. The profile, which is a little more like a ski slope, sort of envision it, is following the direction of the steepest descent. We're talking about flow acceleration, and in this case it would be decelerating, right? Because it's the convergent or the divergent where it would also be decelerating, all right, as it's because of the profile curvature. Now the picture that I skipped over was where you would calculate that surface from the DEM as what is the plan, and you can see the different results. The plan looking at those which are perpendicular to the flow direction, and the profile, and that would be along the direction of flow. So you're able to, by looking at the profile or the plan, you're able to understand more about the flow acceleration or the soil characteristics and the geomorphology. So they're just two different ways of characterizing the landscape. The final way or term that we need to define before we move into our secondary terms is that we need to talk about flow accumulation or catchment area, and that every single cell in the raster has a slope and an aspect, and has also the profile and the plan curvature values as we calculate them. But as we look at how water moves, some cells contribute to other cells, and depending on the landscape. And when we're looking at these, we're talking about flow accumulation. So you could have a cell here, say this is the top of a mountain, you have a cell that's spilling into another cell, and then that's spilling into another cell, and so on, so that as you're looking at these cells, the cells down here will have higher numbers because they have uphill cells spilling into them. These cells are not considered in this, that you're looking at the flow accumulation from the point of view of this cell at the point A, or a cell here over in this. So it's combining the effects of the upslope surface, right? And the term is used flow accumulation or catchment area. And this gives you a little better idea of that, is that you've got the elevation, and you're saying that the higher elevation spills to the lower elevation. And as we're looking at the flow accumulation in the cells up here would be very small. The flow accumulation down here in the valleys where the streams are going to form would be, the flow accumulation value would be very, very high, a very high number. So we're getting an idea, water's moving down this slope, this aspect, and it could be characterized showing the plan or the profile, and that as we look at the very, very large numbers of flow accumulation, you can see where water is collecting on the landscape to a significant level to form a stream or a rill or some sort of conveyance that we could observe on the landscape. And this is referred to, because it's considering the upslope contributing area to a particular cell, it's referred to as a catchment area, and it helps us understand the overall land flow. This is an example of the catchment area, and you can see the flow accumulation, and you can see that those white cells actually have more cells spilling into them. So obviously that's where a stream's going to be forming. So the flat field here is the water's flowing off in this direction, and is the water's consolidating around at these points and then moving further downstream to some larger water body or conveyance. This is another representation of that, where we're showing you those cells that have higher flow accumulation, or that reveal that the catchment area for this particular cell is all these cells upstream, and that it is considering that upstream effect or upstream area from that particular point. And here's a good example of that. Now the significance of this is that this helps us understand volume, runoff volume, or runoff rate, and obviously the soil characteristics. The soil characteristics where there's a high flow accumulation or a catchment, that would be there'd be soil deposition, there'd be different soil properties, there'd be different soil water content, and that would all contribute to our understanding of the geomorphology of that terrain. Now we want to move to secondary calculations. The two secondary attributes we want to consider are the compound topographic index and the stream power index. The stream power index is the catchment area, the flow accumulation, times the slope. The compound topographic index, CTI, is the flow accumulation or catchment area divided by the slope. And they produce very different measures. The stream power index quantifies the erosive power of the flow and isolates those large areas with steep slopes. So you can see the high values in the stream power index where those cells where there's many cells contributing to them, and it's also very steep. We've isolated in this surface those high stream power indices values. You can see along the red here, and this is the way it's represented on the landscape, a gully that is forming within this field, and it measures really the erosive power. So you can see that these cells here have many cells spilling into them, and this hill slope is relatively steep. So it's an indicator where a gully may form, and here's an example of that during the growing condition where there's significant gully formed. Now the compound topographic index is really a measurement of wetness indice, where it identifies where water collects, because in this case we're taking the flow accumulation or the catchment, and we're dividing it by slope. So if we had a flow accumulation of 100 and we were dividing it by a slope of 45%, we would get a fairly small value, whereas if it's fairly flat, and the catchment area, so the slope was somewhere around maybe 2%, and the flow accumulation was a fairly small number, you'd get a much higher value. So here we're looking at where water collects, okay, as opposed to the erosive power of the water. So the compound topographic index or the stream power index are the calculated values we're concerned with. And the CTI is really looking at this idea of low slope with large catchment. So we're trying to find those areas where water would collect, and it would be a good indicator of potential wetlands and also help us describe different soil types. And so these are the two indices that we're concerned with. This now, after describing the stream power index and the CTI, this now concludes our first part of the lecture.